Hey Wargamers, today is the first preview day of Chapter Approved 2018. That means that we're going to learn a ton about what is in Chapter Approved 2018 over the next few days from the Warhammer community team, but also from the GW affiliates that have their preview copies already. So we're going to learn a ton about what's in Chapter Approved, but before that, I wanted to kind of get in here and say, some of my predictions for what I think Chapter Approved will hold for Tau specifically. So there's a few main issues here. One is going to be points adjustments. Another is going to be some changes or, refinement of the commander restriction possibly. And then the third is kind of predicated on the second one, but the 8. So the 8 are Commander Farsight's elite retinue, his best buds and forever pals, that we are finally going to get rules for in Chapter Approved. We weren't able to field them in the past. Well, at least in 8th edition, we had rules for them in 6th and 7th, but not 8th. So this is going to be really exciting to see how they translate. But there's a lot of things that they did or had that don't actually translate directly in 8th edition. So we're going to talk about what each of the members of the 8 might look like in their new rule set. All right, but before we get into that, I want to say thanks for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and hit subscribe. That way you don't miss any of my upcoming content, including going over the 8 once we actually have Chapter Approved rules. All right, so the first thing that we're going to expect are points adjustments. There's always going to be points adjustments up, down, in between for every army in the lineup. But what does that mean for Tau? Well, there was a leak or, a supposed leak a few weeks ago, a month ago or something like that. And I think I heard that was shown to be fabricated. And whether it's fabricated or not, I think there's some, critical thinking or, skepticism that we can apply to that to figure out what it seems most likely to actually be adjusted in Chapter Approved. So the most likely thing that's going to receive a points adjustment is the Riptide, right? I mean, they're very popular. They're have a fairly good staying power and damage output. So they're a good unit, and that's why you see so many of them. And GW is, trying to diversify the field a little bit. So they're tending to put the kibosh on that sort of unit. So I would expect that Riptides are going to go up in price. Probably the heavy burst skin is going to go up in price is what I would think as well. But either way, we're going to see something that is going to make Riptides slightly less efficient. Probably not so inefficient that you never bring them, but probably something that you're going to feel. Not quite as likely as that, but I would say likely is going to be a points decrease for crisis suits. Hopefully, we see a 10-point reduction in them, something like that. It's going to bring them more in line with the general, effectiveness to cost curve that we see across units in the codex and, make them a little bit more playable. I don't know if it's going to be enough to really make them the most points efficient choice for damage output or even maneuverability. But once we get the actual Chapter Approved, I can run the numbers and we can talk more about that. But I think we're going to see some sort of point reduction because if they are, increasing the point of the Riptide, that could be enough to push people towards more crisis suits, but they might want to kind of make the net swing a little bit more impactful. And so if you increase the point of the Riptides and decrease the point of the crisis suits relative to each other, the crisis suit actually becomes much better than if the Riptide were just increased or the crisis suit was just decreased by the same amounts. So with that in mind, I think we're probably going to see a fairly reasonable decrease in crisis suit cost. The thing that I think is probably least likely is going to be 15-point stealth suits. That was what was in that leak. And stealth suits are just, pretty good where they're at in terms of points. And I don't think GW is going to want to really give us a stealth suit for the cost of 2 fire warriors, right? There's so many benefits to having a stealth suit over a fire warrior aside from, the limit on the number that you can take. So stealth suits, of course, have the -1 to hit. They are, tougher to kill. They're faster. They have, the same damage output at 18 inches, barring interactions with other types of rules. So like volley fire, ignoring that, they have a pretty good damage output compared to a fire warrior. So it doesn't seem like you should be able to get, 1 stealth suit for the cost of 2 fire warriors when there's so many benefits for being a stealth suit, compared to a fire warrior. So I don't think that's going to happen. The next big issue is dealing with the commander limit. Now, keep in mind that the commander limit was introduced with the Codex, which came out prior to last year's chapter approved. And so it kind of felt like a double hit or a double whammy when we had both the commander restriction and then the rule of 3. But those two rules are not actually redundant. And this is something that we've talked about a lot on the channel. People have talked a lot about it on various forums and platforms. But it still seems to be a continuing question or point of sensitivity for the community in that there's some confusion that the rule of 3 and the commander limit are somehow redundant. And so I want to kind of address that once and for all and explain why I don't expect the commander limit to go away with this new chapter approved. So the rule of 3 basically says that for any given datasheet, you can only take 3. And the thing about commanders is that they're not a single datasheet. We have commander in XVA, we have commander in Coldstar, we have commander in Enforcer Armor. And so those 3 alone constitute 3 different datasheet entries. And so if we only had the rule of 3, we could still take 9 commanders, which is ridiculous. So that's not going to happen. That's exactly what they were trying to prevent with the commander limitation. So we're not going to see the commander limitation lifted 100%. What I think is actually more likely and kind of fits in with the general trend of GW trying to promote underutilized units is having Farsight and Shadowsun not count towards your commander limit. So I wouldn't be surprised if in chapter approved we see that the commander rule is now, for any given commander or, for any commander keyword, you can only take 3, except for Shadowsun or Farsight. So I think that seems like it could be a happy medium between complete repeal of the commander limitation and, no change at all. I think that's probably the most likely type of avenue that we might see. There might be some tweaks in here associated with the 8 as well and how they work, but yeah, I don't think that the commander limitation is going away. Okay, so that leads us to the third point, which is the most interesting and exciting of the 3 points, the 8. So kind of one of the big issues with the 8 is how the commander limit and the rule 3 affects them. Essentially, there's no way that with the given rule set, you could run all 8 of the 8. And so there has to be some sort of compromise in there potentially. Well, it doesn't have to, but hopefully there's some sort of compromise in there. I'm going to have low expectations, though. I don't think that they're going to allow you to actually take all 8 in match play. I think they will have match play rules for each member of the 8, but they will not allow you to bring all 8 to match play. That is probably going to be something that they say this is more appropriate for narrative or open play. In those realms, go ahead, go crazy, take all 8. But in a competitive sense, you can only take your 3 commanders. And if they throw in that extra thing about Farsight not counting, then you could take Farsight and 3 commanders. There's also hope because Ovesa and Oblatai are not technically commanders. They're explicitly Riptide Shazvray and a Broadside Shazvray. So being non-commander units, they have the honorary title of commander, but maybe they don't actually have the commander keyword because of that. So if that's true, then you could bring Farsight, 3 of the other 7 guys, and then Oblatai and Ovesa, and that actually gets you to 6 of the 8. So if that is actually how that works out, it's not too bad. You miss out on some of the less potent members of the 8, perhaps, if that's the case. I also think it's curious that they said that the 8 are getting new rules, because Farsight is technically part of the 8. So this could just be shorthand for them saying that the other members of the 8 are receiving rules and, just that there's no confusion about what that means. Or it could be that they are actually going to address some of Farsight's weaknesses or make him play a little bit differently in the 8 than he does currently. So I think there's a possibility that they'll address Farsight himself, but I think it's unlikely. All right, and the last point I want to make before we actually start tearing apart the different members of the 8 is that one of the key things about the 8 is that they all had signature systems, or a lot of them had various signature systems. And the way signature systems work today is much different than the way it worked in 6th or 7th edition. In the past, you used to be able to take 2 relics or more on a single character. Can't do that anymore, so that invalidates a lot of the loadouts that you see right away. But also, a lot of that war gear is not war gear anymore. It's not a signature system anymore. And so that raises some problems as well. What do you do with those, pieces of a, member of the 8's loadout that are no longer pieces of war gear that are now stratagems? Well, I think in some cases we're going to see special rules replacing those signature systems. We're going to see things that are going to have kind of a similar feel to them introduced as just special rules for that individual. In other cases, maybe we're going to see them just disappear altogether. So not everything is going to translate perfectly from 7th edition into 8th edition. Just like every other unit in the game, there's going to be some adjustments that are going to be made, and the 8 are no different. So with that said, let's actually get into each of the members and look at what I think their loadouts might be. All right, Commander Bravestorm has Iridium Armor, Plasma Rifle, Flamer, Shield Gen, Stims, and an Honor Gauntlet. So a bunch of those things don't exist anymore, right? I think for the Stimulant Injector, they might just give Bravestorm a 6-up Feel No Pain. I think that's a pretty simple special rule to interject there, especially because the Stimulant Injector stratagem doesn't apply to commanders anymore. It only works on big battle suits, and commanders are not big battle suits. So this isn't going to be able to actually benefit from the Stimulant Injector. So it could be that they just say, you know what, too bad, that's gone now. Or maybe they'll give him a 6-up Feel No Pain. Either way, I think that's probably fair. And then you could also have a you could also just give Bravestorm the Honor Gauntlet as it exists today, but I think there are some issues with that and every other instance of giving signature systems to these named characters, in that the way that signature systems work and the way that you acquire them, you're limited to 1 unless you spend CP, then you can get multiple. I think that makes that less likely. I don't think they're just going to give them signature systems, and so they're going to generally see either substitute war gear or special rules that make up for that. So in the case of the Honor Gauntlet, I could see Bravestorm just having a close combat attack that maybe is strength 8, -1 AP, 2 damage, something like that. Not what the Honor Gauntlet does today, not what it did back then, but still makes it feel a little bit more punchy in close combat. So I could see that for Bravestorm. Commander Brightsword has a Crisis Suit, Twinling Fusion Blasters, which of course are now going to be 2 Fusion Blasters, Advanced Targeting System, Stimulant Injector, Fusion Blades, and a Warscaper drone. So, I'm not talking about the drones in any other instance, but here the Warscaper drone is important. For Stims, again, we could have a 6-up Feel No Pain or not, either way. Of course, with Brightsword and all the other cases, when they have war gear that, is still war gear, I'm assuming that we're going to keep that. So the Fusion Blasters are still going to be there. And I think this might actually be a place where we see the Fusion Blades actually come in. Like maybe they just are saying this is too iconic, we're not going to give this up. And if you're taking Farsight, you have access to them, so not a big deal if they actually retain the Fusion Blades here. The Warscaper drone, though, I think is probably going to be replaced with some special rule like allowing a unit to outflank. Outflanking doesn't exist anymore, but allowing one unit in your army to set up, come on the board off of a table edge after turn 2, something like that, which could be super good for things like breachers. I think that would be really awesome if there was some sort of tactical ability here, because one of the things the Warscaper drone used to be able to do was allow units to do that. They used to be able to outflank essentially using the Warscaper drone. And now because drones aren't part of units and, drones work differently and the Warscaper drone doesn't exist anymore, as well as a bunch of other reasons, I think some sort of tactical thing like that is probably going to make more sense. Another option would be somehow taking in the old Warscaper drone ability of causing dangerous terrain to be, or rather difficult terrain to be dangerous terrain. But because those rules don't exist really anymore and we have some similar stratagems, I don't think that they're going to go that route. So the outflanking thing I think is pretty cool and meshes well with the Farsight set tenet. So either way, I think that that's probably a little bit more likely than any of the other options that we could see with the Warscaper drone. Chivasso has a crisis suit, plasma rifle, flamer, shield generator, vectored retro thrusters, and Puretide engram neurochip. Instead of having vectored retro thrusters, I could see this being our new Cold Star addition to the 8. One of the things about the 8 was that it comprised a lot of the big suits. It didn't have a stealth suit, but it had a crisis suit, it had a Riptide, it had a broadside, and they basically just made that work. It had an enforcer suit, it had a normal commander. So I think it's not unreasonable for them to pick one of these 8 and put them in a Cold Star, and it seems like this would be a good option for that. And then the Puretide engram neurochip. This might be wish listing, but maybe they would replace that with something like the Amulet of Arthas Moloch. Is 100% wish listing, almost certainly not going to happen. But if they could allow this character to have a Deny the Witch, that would be really nice. I think that would make a big difference, and of course is fluffy as well. But also we could see this just as a simple reroll, ones to hit or something like that, which is probably a lot more likely. But still, Puretide engram neurochip probably isn't going to make it over to one of these characters. Right. Torchstar has a crisis suit, 2 flamers, target lock, drone controller, multi-spectrum sensor suite, and neuroweb system jammer. This is by far the hardest hit of the 8 in terms of the transition from 7th to 8th. Most of this war gear doesn't exist anymore and or doesn't do anything for its loadout, right? Like target lock doesn't affect flamers at all. So there's no reason to have a target lock on this character anymore. Drone controller, yeah, you could have that. Multi-spectrum sensor suite and neuroweb system jammer are both stratagems now. So this character is completely gutted. I think both multi-spectrum sensor suite and neuroweb system jammer are just going to be gone. I don't think that they're going to bring it in. And, kind of the trend here is I think that they want these commanders to have 3 weapons, or 3 systems in general, right? Like, look at Farsight. He has the Dawn Blade, he has his plasma rifle, and his shield generator. Even though, like an actual commander could have 4 weapons, this is what Farsight uses. And so I think that type of more restrained approach to loadout is going to be something that you see throughout. I don't think that they're going to stick a commander, though, with only 2 flamers. So I would tend to think that maybe we're going to see 3 flamers instead. That would be cool. But yeah, 3 flamers. And then maybe instead of, or maybe in order to compensate for some of the other stuff, Torchstar always advances a full 6 inches instead of rolling for it. I think that would work out fairly well because it synergizes well with the flamers and also goes along with a lot of the other stuff that Farsight Enclaves are going to be doing. So it closes the gap, makes this a more functional unit. Eric Kahn is in an Enforcer suit, so this is the Enforcer component of the 8. He has a plasma rifle, a cyclic ion blaster, airburst fragmentation projector, a counterfire defense system, repulsor impact field. So repulsor impact field is now a stratagem, but probably wouldn't really replace this because of all the war gear he already has, right? He already has a bunch of weapons. I don't see them adding another rule on top of this that would make him a little bit more powerful than any of the other members of the 8 thus far. So I think they're probably just going to leave him at having those weapons and say, you know what, you got off easy compared to Torchstar. So, you should be thankful that's all that happened to you. So Eric Kahn, I think, is probably going to stay just pretty much the same. I also think that Oblatai is going to stay the same. Oblatai is the broadside component of the 8. He has 2 heavy high-yield missile pods, 2 smart missile systems, a seeker missile, and I think that's pretty much how he's going to stay. He also has a velocity tracker. Sure, why not? But yeah, I don't think they're going to touch Oblatai either. And one of the biggest questions that I had going into this was Ovesa. So Ovesa is the Riptide. Ovesa was a fantastic component to a lot of lists in 6th and 7th edition, and really was, probably the best member of the 8 in those army lists. So Ovesa, very popular character back in the day. And Ovesa has a Riptide, of course, Ion Accelerator, 2 Fusion Blasters, Early Warning Override, Stimulant Injector, and Earthcast Pilot Array. So Stims, you know, they could give Ovesa a Feel No Pain. I think that's probably unlikely, but yeah, I think this, of all the characters that had stimulant injectors in the 8, I think Ovesa is the least likely to actually see a rule to make up for that, because it's a Riptide, and they are a little anxious about Riptides. So I don't think they're going to make that happen. But the Earthcast Pilot Ray was really Ovesa's signature ability, and for that, I think they're probably going to make it a lot more simple. Basically, allow Ovesa to reroll hit rolls of 1, and then make Ovesa's weapon skill 6-up. It used to make Ovesa allow Ovesa to re-roll rolls for Nova Charge. Now that whole mechanic isn't even a thing, so we're just gonna, you know, ignore that, pretend like it didn't happen. And then it used to allow for re-rolls, and also to, or it also made you have a worse ballistic skill. And so I think, weapon skill. So I think this actually translates pretty well and is fairly accurate to the original Ovesa using 8th edition rules. So Riptide, Ion Accelerator, Fusion Blasters, Early Warning Override, sure, why not? And then having the ability to reroll hit rolls of 1, but having a weapon skill that's a 6-up seems like a fair trade. So yeah, that's what I think the 8 are going to look like. A few changes, not a ton of changes to the overall loadout, but it all comes down to how those special rules are going to play into this new version of the 8. Overall, you know, if we see that you can only bring 3 of them, I think, you know, the real standouts are Ovesa, because he's going to be a separate Riptide entry. He's not going to count as one of your 3 Riptides, so you could still bring 4 Riptides. I think that's going to be a big attractant. I think Bravestorm or Brightsword, if we use those types of special rules that I talked about, could be good. And then Ericon also is going to be pretty good as well. I really would like to see Torchstar have like some really crazy powerful flamer weapons, but assuming that Torchstar stays with just normal flamers, you're not going to see Torchstar, unfortunately. But yeah, pretty excited. We will look at all the actual rules when they come out, and you know, maybe we can even do a comparison to see how well I did. Let me know what you think in the comments below. What are you most excited about in Chapter Approved 2018? What do you think the 8 are going to look like? All that stuff. Love to hear it. As always, thanks for watching, and of course, happy wargaming. Hey everyone, this video was made possible by my supporters over on Patreon. If you enjoyed this video, consider joining our community over there. Special thanks to Errant Fox, Max Harrison, No Excuses Panda, Jared Egler, Nick Steele, Tao Oswald, Brian Mann, Jake Johnson, Scott J. Smith, Stephen Cohen, Eric Jackson, Andy M. Young, Benjamin, Giovanni DiMaggio, Julian Peck, Peter Benjamin Parker, RP, Timothy K. Piney, and Yuhai Penguin.